listening to Anglatinas. I'm Rosie.
And I'm Izzy, and we're best friends from the UK.
We've spent these last few years living and travelling in Latin America, being immersed in new cultures, falling in and out of love, and learning to balance the old with the new.
Join us on this journey as we explore life living between continents, living the dream, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
We are
Anglatinas. We hope you enjoy the ride. Hello.
Hi. Hi, Izzy.
I think we should share with the Anglatinas, or welcome to Anglatinas.
Welcome, everybody.
I think we should share that, like, we always have a little catch up before we start recording.
A little catch up, an hour's catch up.
Yeah, if you want us to just post the catch ups instead of the episodes, then let us know in the comments.
Much
Very
more juicy,
juicy.
to be fair. Not safe for work though, some of it.
Yeah.
But yes. Here we are. What episode would this be now? 11.
Wow. 11.
Episode 11. Madness. The topic of today's episode is his request. I'm joking. It's religion and spirituality. Why,
Yes.
you might ask? Why are we talking about religion and spirituality, is he?
So by now, I feel like everyone is, they're in tune with the whole Anglatinas concept.
Vibe.
Like all of these topics that we bring are like things that maybe we've changed our mind about, or they've been like heavily influenced by our experiences abroad, but specifically in Latin America, and I think that that's one of the things that's like really different, and that I've definitely changed my mind a lot on since being here. So that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree,
Basically, I agree completely, but I just want to joke that you're going to drop the bombshell that you're now a born-again Christian. And you've just been dunked in the sea for your baptism. But
no, I would never ever. No. Would you not? As a Christian? No, what has this got to do with Christianity? I'm still against organized religion.
Okay, all right then. Go on then. Say why. Why are you against organized
But on that
religion?
point, did you see that Russell Brand has like been baptized and is now like a born again Christian? Just on that note.
Didn't. Had no idea. No,
I think my point is that I think like in the past I was very like against religion. Like for me it was like a very negative thing. Like the people who I had in my life in England who were religious were like very kind of imposing maybe religious people, and for me that was like a negative thing, like people who had very strong views connected to religion and would try and like impose that on other people. And I think that it's not necessarily just religion, but here I think like faith is a lot stronger. So like whether you're going to call that like, because here in Brazil like there's lots of religions, it's not just Christianity, there's like religions of African origin that have like been mixed together with indigenous religions that were here before colonization. So there's like a lot of mixture here. But I just think the thing is about faith, believing in however you want to label that, or however people like exercise that. There's a much stronger faith in something bigger than yourself. So I think obviously there are lots of religious people in Europe, but on a day-to-day sense, I think that the culture is more the strongest belief is in like science and things that you can prove, and it's like, oh, and if you can't prove it, then it doesn't exist. And like I think that the cultural belief is stronger on this side, whereas I'm sure we'll get into it today, but like there is a stronger sense of organized religion here as well, but I just think faith is bigger. So I think like before I lived here, and I know definitely before this, because I remember talking about this with Fernando like when we first met, like here we joke about this, Rose, like it's really common to say like, oh, thank God, like all the time, just about simple things like, oh, I got home safely, like thank God, gracias a Dios. And before I think my mindset was like, well, it's not everything is up to God. Like if you achieve something, then that's like thanks to you and your hard work. Whereas today, I changed my mind about that, because I think like we have, like, why do I have this opportunity and not another person? Like, why do I live this privileged life and other people are in poverty? And like that is like thanks to something bigger than us,
Yeah.
whether you want to call it luck or God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, there is something that we should be grateful for that's bigger than us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you say that then, or when you and your husband say that, or when you and other Brazilian people say that, what's kind of in your, I know it's also just like a throwaway comment, you're not necessarily thinking about it that deep all the time.
I'm saying my reflection on that, like integration, is that.
But for example, what are you personally thinking then? Okay, or when you reflect on that, what are you sending thanks to? The universe?
Yeah, for me, I don't like believe in like one God who's up in the sky. Like I don't affiliate with any particular religion, but just
some higher power.
Yeah, I think for me it's very like connected to nature, like the forces of nature. Like that's kind of what I feel connected to. And there's like I know that's going to sound like very wishy-washy to a lot of people who are listening to that, but here, for example, there's like a lot of African rooted religions that have like orishas, which are like spirits or gods that are related to each element of the nature. And to me that kind of like makes sense, because to me the nature is a stronger force than us. Like we can't control the wind and the ocean and the, you know, and I know that sounds very wishy-washy, but to me it makes sense.
That sounds wishy-washy. I don't think that sounds wishy-washy at all. I think that's completely sensical.
Like for me, I don't like pray, but for example, if I go to the beach and like listen to the waves and like sit and meditate, for me that's like connecting to something that's bigger than us and
bigger than you.
Things that have been worshipped for thousands and millions of years, the stars, the sun,
and that you can interpret in any way that you want. Not that somebody is like dictating to you that this is who it is and this is what you should do. And it's like each person has their own relationship to that higher power, and they can create it whatever they want that to be. It's not like, okay, it's a man in the sky or a guy with a long beard called Jesus, blah blah blah. I think that's the most key difference, isn't it? It's like you decide. It's not told to you what it is that you worship or
I think that's why I would choose the word like faith. It's like faith, belief in something. It's faith, trust, rather than like reverence to like one specific God or like one. I think that changed for me as well after like I had more experience with death as well, like which obviously happened while I was here, so that's like all integrated. But like it makes, and like experiences with ayahuasca, which is related to the afterlife as well. I think it doesn't make sense to me anymore that there's like just this reality that we experience here and now. Like there are different like levels of consciousness that we're able to access, either through like whatever you want to call it, meditation or prayer or consumption of like plants, which take us to other places. And I think that like when I had like friends pass away, or even when my granddad passed away, there are moments where I feel like, but again, it's me like connected to nature. Like sometimes I just get a really strong sense of like my friend who passed away, for example, with like a really strong like gust of wind, or sometimes like something like this, and I get like a really strong like feeling of her, which to me is just like like that's like connected to nature for me. But like I said, I don't believe that there's like heaven and hell that people go to, but I just don't believe that death is like the end. I think that doesn't make sense to me. If we can access these places where we like have conversations and see people, and people communicate things to us through these practices that like our ancestors have done for millions of years, we're just disconnected from that. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I used to know what you mean a lot more than I know what you mean now. It's so weird.
That's why I mean people who are listening to this are just gonna think they're so wishy-washy because
No, people that are listening to this, e.g., British people that are listening to this, I'm going to be honest with you, is you're going to think, what a load of shit. You know, what the hell are you talking about? Because British, and as we've talked about in the stereotypes episode, we are a bunch of cynics, aren't we? We are like, and this is one of my main points that I wanted to say today, is that my experience being living abroad has only brought it home to me more, and I don't think I was aware of this before, but it really, really hammers home how cynical we are. Like the cynicism in Great Britain, I don't know about wider Europe, but I don't even know about the rest of the country, but I can say my particular part of Britain is completely cynical. Yes, there is like this kind of vague religious Christian upbringing that I had. Yeah, but there wasn't like, nobody practiced, nobody prayed. Like we went to church for a wedding or a funeral, but it wasn't, or, you know, we go and visit kind of like our granddad's graves or whatever, but it's not like anybody talks about what they believe. If they do believe in an afterlife, if they do believe in a God, that wasn't really ever talked about. I don't know if it was the same for you, but
I had my upbringing wasn't religious at all.
Zero.
But I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Like for me, it's not really about religion. I don't know if it's gonna come across like it is about that, but like I was saying, I think it's kind of strange to me. The relationship with religion here in South America is strange to me. Like it's a bit jarring for me because like there is a very strong, like, depending on where you are in the continent, either Christian or Catholic or evangelical faith that's really very still alive here today, which is like very jarring for me because I think like there's also very strong religions with, like I said, like from African origins or indigenous origins, and it becomes like very clear to me, like when you meet people who are extremely religious still today, that kind of colonization and like the violence of that is very like clear to me, because it's kind of crazy how like a whole continent is like so I don't know, dedicated or still very connected to something that was violently enforced on them. Like it's strange to me to see someone who's like very physically like Bolivian or who's like very extremely like religious on the Christian side, because it's jarring to me. It makes me realize like how strong that imposition was, you know. Had the Spanish and the Portuguese not had arrived here, obviously other religions and other beliefs would be like reigning the continent. So I think that's like that's like very violent to me, and I have contact with these other types of religions here as well, which I think are like great, but I just wouldn't affiliate with any organized religion, because I think that when you have that connection to like a system and an organization and people of power, things get very confused.
Automatically like fucks up. Not automatically.
When the human takes charge of it, we have all of these like, you know, abuse of power and like questionable interpretations, and I think that goes for any religion. So that's why I don't.
Right. Okay.
So if you think about like, obviously not all, can't generalize, and I don't have knowledge of all of the like ancient religions in Latin America, but like the what are the ones who were in, because there's the Mayans, that's more Central America, and then like Mexico had that Aztecs. Had these ceremonies like where it wasn't ayahuasca, but I think it was like some form of mushroom that was like the
I can't remember the name of the mushroom, but it is a fungi. I can't remember, but
when there's like,
was that to connect with the spirits,
the spirit world? From I mean, you might know better than me, from like what I've read, because there's like accounts of like when the Spanish arrived and they like wrote about these that's the thing about colonization and history as well, isn't it? Like we have all of these accounts of like the Spanish and Portuguese arriving here and like their interpretations of what was happening, but we don't really have those same records from the other side. So
Yeah.
like the Spaniards like arriving and like seeing these like devil worshipping ceremonies, but who decided that that was the
exactly.
devil?
Exactly. Who writes history? You know.
But just relating it back to I like went on a tangent with the Aztecs and the Mayans, but like in these, like in Umbanda today, like nothing is consumed. It's not like ayahuasca or anything like that. It's just a ceremony like where people sing basically. And
Yeah. Sure.
the point, like taking it back to the original point, I think it's about, for me today, it's about like each person. It's actually more about having a connection with yourself than anything else, because like whether you're gonna like say, I don't know, like you know that scene out of Forgetting Sarah Marshall where like Russell Brand's got all of them tattoos related to like loads of different religions, and she's like, this is bullshit because this is Hindu and this is Sanskrit and you think you're a citizen of the world, but actually it's just all bullshit because you don't believe in anything. I feel like I sound like that, like, oh, just like take all of the things from every religion that you want and like
Are you
appropriate
Russell
it.
Brand in this analogy? Are you Russell Brand?
In the film analogy, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not what I mean. I mean, like, if you want to call it like meditation, or if you want to call it prayer, or if you want to, it's like a way for you to like be in connection with something, but it's not actually about the something, it's about yourself, like
and your openness to that.
just silence. Like
Yeah.
how many people nowadays like have a moment in their day to just like sit in silence and breathe and just like hear your own thoughts.
I think lots of people, and I was chatting to this with some friends as well, lots of people are actually, it's kind of a joke, but scared to do that. You know, they're
Yeah.
like, we actively avoid, don't we? Like, oh, I'm gonna start chopping some vegetables for tea, or I'm gonna like wash up. I'll put a podcast on. Yeah. I'll put Anglatinas on, or I'll put yeah, literally. Or, you know, go for a walk, get sitting on the bus, always headphones in. So yeah, I agree with that. It also, it's not always just to quieten the thoughts though. It's also a place of like productivity, like, oh, what else can I, but I guess it all ties into one. It's like this idea, isn't it? Like, what else can I be doing? Oh, I've got 15 minutes on the bus. I could also be listening to an audio book or something. But
yeah, and that's
yeah.
like the root of it, isn't it? But the cause is like lack of connection, and the connection to be what is like whatever you want to call it. Do you know what I mean? If you want to call it God, if you want to call it yourself, if you want to call it the universe or the sky, whatever. But it's just like, what are you connected to other than your smartphone? Like, I think it's a very broad term these days, isn't it? Like spirituality, like, oh, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. But like, what does that mean? For most people, maybe they think that like we just don't need that anymore. Because I think that it has turned into a thing of like, oh, you're either religious or you're not. Like, I'm not religious. But I just think that it's what you said about the cynicism. Yeah.
Okay. So then how would you answer that question? What is that? What
I think it's about connection. Just giving examples of like the things that I have contact with now that make you like open your mind. I'm not saying that I'm affiliated with those things. I'm just saying that they're like normal things here. So obviously it makes you think twice about these things. I don't think that like I the reason that I just think I'm curious. Like I would be curious to learn about any religion now, but before I wouldn't have. I was like, oh no, religion, that's not a good thing.
So the point is spirituality.
But what do you think about that now? Let's take the heat off me for a second.
What about spirituality and
well,
my
we're talking about
relationship?
how those thoughts have changed since being here. So how has that changed for you? What was your experience here in Mexico?
Yeah, I
Uruguay?
mean, In Mexico, not so much. Like Mexico is a weird one. I think this about religion. I think this about other kind of cultural aspects of Mexico. It's kind of an in between.
Do you think
I
that's a
think that
lot to do with where you were as well?
um potentially, yeah. But also I had lots of exposure to inner Mexico, in the interior of Mexico, real Mexico, not just Cancun.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I guess if I went to kind of more, it's also a huge metropolis, huge city. So if I went to more kind of like the countryside areas, I would have a very different view. But I just have this, sometimes I have this idea that Mexico is kind of an in between, or like it's losing its sense of it's losing its roots because of America, and it is there is so much like American influence in it that it's in this weird place of, yeah, like losing any connection to ancient civilizations or whatever. Like hearing you talk about Brazil like that, I can't place myself in Mexico in the way that you were just talking about those
But
experiences in Brazil, if that makes sense.
yeah, but I don't think I would have had that perspective like after a year or after 2 years of being here. I think that's after like a lot more time of living
Do you
here
think
and
so?
being exposed to different things. You know what I mean?
Do you think it's also to do with Floripa, or is that a countrywide thing as well?
No, yeah.
Because the island's quite a spiritual place, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but but these things are like widespread across the country in
Yeah,
terms of like, I mean, the strongest place for Umbanda is like Bahia, which
northeast.
was closer to, yeah, I mean, than it
Mm,
is here. But that's what I mean. It's very
mm,
widespread, and the two things like coexist. You know what I mean? This is what I was going to say about, and this is like one of my big interest in going to Guatemala as well. I just find it fascinating, like places that have like Bolivia is like this as well, like places that have a very strong connection still to their like indigenous culture, and the way that that's like grown and coexisted
yeah,
with the
modern world.
Spanish or Portuguese,
Yeah,
well, European influence, because like
yeah,
Bolivia is a very good example of that as well,
yeah,
like how normal it is for things to be so indigenous still, but also still
yeah,
so European, or whether you talk about religion or anything else really. And
yeah,
like I just think that I, I think it's to do with a personal interest as well. It doesn't really matter whether I believe in it or not, but I just think, how can you ignore millennia of humans who like believed in these things? Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
Christianity is very, very young
yeah,
compared to all of the other like beliefs, whether you want to call it religions or just like beliefs that have existed for thousands and thousands of years. Like,
I
and I
think
just
one
find it
thing that
fascinating. Whether
yeah,
I'm gonna like worship or not, or like I just find it fascinating. Like, why would we not want to learn about that?
yeah, and I think it brings to like the hypocrisy of it. How can we have been brought up or in a place where, you know, it's okay to talk about God and Jesus and all of these things, but then if you mention something like, I just openly took the piss out of like voodoo magic or whatever, if you mention something like that, that's like scoffed at, but what's the difference? And to answer the question is of where I'm at, or what my experience of it is, it's just that, like it's just the opening. I don't particularly see myself, especially not now. Maybe when I was over there and I was around it and I was having these conversations and reading these things, like it does obviously kind of seep in and have an effect. But kind of now that I'm not in that, less so. But kind of similar in the way to the vegetables thing. It's just a broadening and just a
Yeah.
widening and opening of possibility. You know, it's not like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, now I believe this. No, not at all. Or now I believe in the power of nature. Like I can't put my hand on my heart and say yes, but I'm more open to those possibilities. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and also just to be clear as well, I'm not saying that like everyone here feels like that. I'm saying like how
Yeah.
I have changed with the experiences that I've had
Yeah.
here. And I'm
What
sure
you've
that
learned and what you've seen.
if I live somewhere else as well, and I don't mean like the cultural influence of Floripa, but just like I do live very connected to nature, so it's obviously a lot easier to
Yeah.
feel like that when you're like surrounded by
Yeah.
trees and mountains and waterfalls and the ocean. Like if I lived in São Paulo or whatever, then I'm sure,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, my lifestyle would be very different, and my thoughts and feelings would reflect that, I guess. So
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question though, and this may or may not be related, but I was in Ibiza last week and having a conversation with a Spaniard from Madrid, right? One of the bar staff. And is it related, is he to talk about like star signs and stuff? Is that involved? Is that spirituality, or is that a different topic?
I think it's different, but I think it is relevant to what we're talking about.
Okay, because I want to ask you this question because I asked it to her and she couldn't tell me. So after a few drinks, whatever, or a few minutes of chatting, it didn't go on very long before the topic of star signs came up, and it's kind of
Spanish.
She was Spanish, yeah. So it's kind of often in this podcast we bust some myths, but actually this is a myth that I'm going to kind of reaffirm because all people of Latin origin, all of them, I'm putting a blanket on it. They all are obsessed with star signs and zodiac, whatever, and the stars and celestial bodies and stuff. So yeah, I think this is related. And anyway, so she asked me about star signs and started to look at my, what do you call it, like mappa,
birth chart.
Okay, yeah, my birth chart in astrology and everything. And I asked her and I said, but why do people of Latin origin, why is that such kind of in the forefront of their minds? Why is that such a concern for you guys? And for us, it's not necessarily. What has been taught differently, or how have they been, what is different about them that makes them care about that so much? Izzy, can you shed any light?
Specifically about star signs and horoscopes, like Brazilians are so into it. Like you could meet someone new and them ask you what your star sign is before they ask you like what you do for a living,
what your name is, or when you're born.
Very
exactly.
like it's very big here, like just in general. Even if people aren't like really well versed in it, they're gonna like know what their star sign is, what their so sun, moon, rising,
exactly,
Mars.
which is what this woman was asking me, and I was like, don't know.
Didn't know.
I know I'm Aquarius, babe, and that's it. I don't know. So that's why we had to pull up the
this is one of the examples that I gave, that like before, for example, I didn't know what your star sign was. Like now I know what it is because I know what all the months are and like I know a lot about it. But like before, like the beginning of our like all of our friendship, I wouldn't have been like, oh well, Rose doing that. She's just such a so Aquarius.
Yeah. So
why? But I don't know why.
I
don't know why. I don't know why.
It's fascinating though, isn't it? Because
I don't know why, but it's just so true. That was my point.
The pattern comes up to me and it makes me,
I think it's related. I don't know, people are just more open and more, it's like we talked about before, like more emotional and more open-minded and more, it's all mixed in, isn't it? But I don't know why. We should.
But they must be taught it at school, or there must be like conversations around it.
No.
There must be some kind of like fairy tales, or there must be.
Fernando doesn't know anything about it. Like, I mean, in general, people were like very into it, but like it's not a rule. But this is a good point because I think this ties in as well, like to the connection with those kind of things. If you think about, let's talk about monuments, okay? All of the world's monuments, the ancient monuments, are connected to the same things. Like the points, there's like a rock arrangement. You've got here
Stonehenge in your mind, haven't you?
But all of these things, like there's a rock arrangement here in Floripa that's been here for like 12,000 years, and the alignments with like the sunrise and the sunset and like the stars and the moon are the same as the alignments in Angkor Wat that we've been to, in Stonehenge, the stones in Easter Island, the Egyptian pyramids. And like, I'm sorry, that just can't be a fucking coincidence. If you don't believe that like our ancestors were not connected to and that doesn't have to have anything to do with spirits. It might just be, you know, they were connected to the stars and the planets because they had a lot of time to look at them, and there was no light pollution, and they like respected the nature. You know what I mean? But how can you say that doesn't mean anything? And I don't mean to be like, oh, you need to adopt that in your day-to-day, but just like, how can you not be fascinated by that is like all over the world. They weren't like chatting on WhatsApp about it.
What?
They weren't like chatting on WhatsApp about it. Like, how is that a coincidence? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you imagine like a group chat like Cleopatra sends to I don't know, some ancient Hey, y'all.
Are you watching the sunset, lol?
Yeah. Are you up? Seeing the sunset? In it. LOL. Kiss kiss. Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right, Izzy. You are completely right. And those kind of things
we think
are what I love.
Now, yeah, exactly. This is a great way to end it, because we think that we're at like the peak of like human knowledge and technology, and it's like when you really start to delve into these things, we were so fucking intelligent, and we were so connected, and we were so, I mean, all of these mysteries that we like to put it on, like, oh yeah, the ETs built the pyramids and stuff, just because we don't want to admit that our ancestors, our black and brown ancestors, were more intelligent and more spiritually developed than we are.
Yeah. How did they lift those stones? Those stones are like, for the pyramids, I haven't been, but is it the pyramids where the stones are like so ridiculously big? And obviously without any machinery, how did they get them up there? That's what gets me.
There's lots of like theories to do with like pulleys and like rivers and logs, and so there's loads of different like theories, but I don't know, I mean, it's beyond than what we can wrap our heads around, like, because a machine didn't do it.
Exactly, because they didn't have this stuff at their fingertips. It's like, wow, they actually smashed it. Fair play to them. Fair play to the ancient Egyptians and all them.
Another question, why have they been so demonized in Western society? Well, that's why. Because when people aren't expanding their mind, they're much easier to control. It's much easier to be convinced into the fact that, oh yeah, I need to work 9 to 5 and pay taxes. If everyone was spiritually what's the word,
in tune,
in tune, or
like alive,
awakened, enlightened, I don't think we would all be doing this shit that we're doing en masse. People would be like, what the
legalize fuck? Basically what he's saying is legalize marijuana. It's called mescaline, this naturally occurring psychedelic that comes from the Mexican cactus.
Yeah, that's the one.
And the San Pedro cactus in Peru and
Ecuador. There's peyote as well, isn't it?
But no, it would be good to get people's thoughts. Do we sound crazy? What do you think? Maybe it's changing. You know, maybe it's not such a thing as us and them, or over here and over there, as much as it is people are becoming more accepting slowly, generally, of these things now. And, you know, spirituality, I think, is seeping into all corners of the globe and all cultures. Like even something so simple as yoga and meditation, you know, 10, 15 years ago, people weren't doing yoga and meditating in this country. No way. Do you know what I mean? So even things like that is slowly starting to change, I think. So, but yeah, let us know what you think, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, guys. Also, if you relate to any of this, or you agree or disagree with anything, then let us know, because we would love to know. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much. Thank you. You have been listening to Anglatinas. Bye. Bye.